I'd been traveling for 3 weeks with my twin babies when the train finally pulled into Copper Springs. Wyoming, Rose and James, barely 4 months old, had cried through most of Kansas. My back ached from holding them through endless miles. My traveling dress bore stains no amount of scrubbing would lift. And my last clean diaper hung drying from my carpet tag handle like a flag of surrender. I wasn't coming from somewhere good. I was running from somewhere worse. There's a difference, though most people don't care to see it. The advertisement had been clear enough. Widower rancher seeks wife. Must be hardworking, God-fearing, ready for frontier life. It hadn't asked if I came alone. I'd written back honestly mostly. I'd told Mr. Harrison Garrett about the twins, about my circumstances. I'd been honest about everything except the part that would have stopped his letters immediately, that I'd never actually been married at all. The baby's father had made promises, then vanished the moment I told him. My family had made me leave before I showed. The women's boarding house where I'd given birth alone had turned me out when my money ran dry. The twins were 3 days old when I placed that advertisement response, my handwriting shaking so badly I could barely form the words. But Mr. Garrett had written back. "Children are a blessing," he'd said. "A ready-made family suits me fine." I'd let myself believe it. I'd let myself imagine a man who'd see past my shame to the fierce love I had for these babies. A man who'd understand that I'd made mistakes but wouldn't compound them. Foolish. Maybe, but hope makes fools of us all, and I'd been desperate enough to let it make a fool of me. Standing on that platform, Rose crying against my shoulder, and James whimpering in the sling at my chest. I scanned the sparse crowd for the man whose photograph I'd memorized. Square jaw, serious eyes, a hat tilted just slightly to the left in the studio portrait. I saw him immediately. He stood beside his wagon, watching the passengers disembark with the careful attention of a man expecting someone. Then his eyes found me, found the babies, and I watched his expression change from anticipation to disgust in the span of a single breath. He walked toward me with the deliberate stride of a man approaching something distasteful. He must, nonetheless, handle. My arms tightened around Rose instinctively. I'd seen that look before. I knew what came next. Miss Cooper. Not a question. An accusation. Mr. Garrett. I lifted my chin, refusing to apologize for existing. I wrote you about, you said you had children. You didn't say. He gestured vaguely at my rumpled traveling clothes, my too young face, the obvious absence of morning attire. You didn't say you were unmarried. The word tasted like ash, but I wouldn't let him make me swallow it in silence. I was honest about everything that mattered. These babies needed a father. You said children were a blessing. I meant legitimate children. His voice dropped low, conscious of the watching townspeople. I meant a widow's children, not evidence of sin. I have a reputation in this territory. I can't have people thinking I'd taken a woman like you. A woman like you. 4 words that reduced me to nothing. I'd heard variations before from my family, from the boarding house matron, from strangers on the train who noticed no wedding ring. Each time, it carved away another piece of who I thought I was. Then I suppose we have nothing further to discuss. My voice stayed steady, though everything inside me was breaking. If you'd be kind enough to direct me to the nearest hotel, I'll do no such thing. My conscience won't allow it. He pulled an envelope from his coat pocket. my train fare. I realized the money he'd sent. Here, this should get you back east. What you do there is no concern of mine. He pressed the envelope into my free hand and walked away. Just walked away, climbed into his wagon, and drove off without looking back. I stood there holding my babies and that envelope, watching the only future I dared imagine disappear in a cloud of dust. That's when I heard the quiet voice behind me. "Miss Cooper, I'm Dr. Samuel Brennan." I turned to find a man perhaps 10 years older than Garrett, with silver threading through dark hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of either laughter or sorrow. Couldn't yet tell which. He held his medical bag in one hand, his hat in the other, the latter a small gesture of respect that caught me off guard. "I couldn't help but overhear," he said gently, "and I find myself in an unusual position to make you an unusual offer. Would you perhaps take a cup of tea at the hotel while we discuss it? You look as though you could use a moment to sit down." I wanted to refuse on principle. Wanted to prove I needed nothing from anyone. But Rose whimpered against my shoulder, and James's weight in the sling was pulling my spine crooked. And my pride seemed a small thing compared to a chair and a moment's rest. "All right," I said. The hotel parlor was blessedly quiet. Dr. Brennan had arranged for a private corner table and ordered not just tea, but fresh milk, warm bread, and a bowl of stew that made my empty stomach clench with longing. The stew smelled like heaven. I couldn't remember the last time someone had ordered food for me, anticipated my needs, treated me like I deserved basic care. I hated how much that simple gesture meant. He'd also quietly requested a basin of warm water, which sat beside me now as I cleaned James's face with a dampened cloth. "I'll be direct," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "I lost my wife and infant son 2 years ago. Childbirth complications. Since then, I've lived in my clinic, worked until exhaustion, and convinced myself that was enough of a life." I stopped cleaning James to look at him properly. His eyes held the particular emptiness of someone who'd survived grief, but hadn't yet figured out how to live again. I knew that emptiness. I'd seen it in my own reflection often enough. "Watching Garrett walk away from you and those babies," he shook his head. "It reminded me that some of us are looking for the wrong things." He wanted a convenient fiction, a ready-made family with no messy truth attached. But messy truth is all any of us really have. Isn't it, Dr. Brennan? I appreciate your kindness. But I'm not interested in charity. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a business arrangement that might benefit us both." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I need a wife. My practice suffers because women won't come to a bachelor doctor for certain complaints. I need someone to manage my household, perhaps assist with patients. In return, I can offer you and your children security, respectability, and," he hesitated, "and a chance to stop running. You'd marry me knowing what people will say, what they'll assume. I'm a doctor. Miss Cooper, I've delivered babies. I can count months on a calendar as well as anyone." His smile was sad. But I also know that circumstances aren't always what they appear, and even when they are, I'm in no position to cast stones. My own grief has made me less than perfect at living. Business arrangement, partnership, mutual benefit. He was using careful words, lawyer words, words that kept emotion at a safe distance. I appreciated that. Emotion had destroyed me once already. I looked down at my twins, then back at this strange, honest man. What exactly are you proposing, Dr. Brennan? A partnership based on mutual need and, perhaps, mutual healing, nothing more than you're willing to give. Nothing more than you're willing to give. That phrase lodged somewhere in my chest. What was I willing to give? What did I even have left to offer? I thought about his offer for 3 days. Mrs. Patterson, the kind hotel owner, let me stay in a small room off the kitchen in exchange for helping with dishes. She didn't ask questions, just set out extra blankets and made sure I had warm milk for the babies. On the 3rd day, I found Dr. Brennan at his clinic. I'll marry you, I said, but I need to know what you expect. Exactly. He set down the bandages he'd been organizing. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I know I need someone to manage the house cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. And I'd appreciate help with patients when needed. Beyond that, he paused. Beyond that, I suppose we'll figure it out as we go. And the babies, they're part of you. Of course they're welcome. What about, I hesitated, my face warming. What about other expectations, marital expectations? Understanding crossed his face. I'm proposing a partnership, Miss Cooper. Not demanding anything beyond what you're comfortable giving. If that changes someday, we can discuss it then. But there's no pressure. No obligation beyond what we've discussed. We married that afternoon in a brief civil ceremony. Mrs. Patterson served as witness and kindly offered to watch the twins during the proceedings. Dr. Brennan Samuel, as he quietly asked me to call him, wore a clean suit that smelled of cedar and thyme. I wore the only dress I owned that wasn't travel-stained. The judge asked if I took this man. I said I did, and meant it as a business agreement. Samuel said the same, and I believed he meant it the same way. His house sat behind his clinic, a neat 2-story structure that spoke of a woman's touch, now absent. Inside, everything remained exactly as she'd left it, preserved like a museum to his loss. Lace curtains, embroidered samplers, a rocking chair positioned by the window. I haven't changed anything, he admitted, standing awkwardly in his own entryway. I didn't know how to... I understood that paralysis, when things hurt too much. Sometimes the only thing you can do is stop moving entirely. Stop changing anything. Stop living, really. Just existing in the spaces between what was and what might have been. Would you mind if I did just small things? To make it more functional for the babies. Relief flooded his face. Please. Make it yours. Make it. Make it live again. Those first weeks. We moved around each other like strangers sharing a boarding house. He rose before dawn to see patients. I managed the household, cooked meals, washed endless baby clothes. We spoke only of practical matters. He needed more bandages rolled. I needed flour from the mercantile. It should have felt lonely. Instead, it felt safe, predictable. I'd had enough surprises to last a lifetime. But I noticed things, small things that added up to larger truths. I noticed how Samuel would leave his medical books open on the kitchen table, positioned where I could read them while nursing. How he'd quietly replenish my lamp oil so I wouldn't run out during nighttime feedings. How he'd return from house calls with small gifts, not for me, but for the babies, a rattle carved from wood. Soft blankets. Once, impossibly, a music box that played gentle lullabies. A grateful patient. He'd say gruffly, not meeting my eyes, her baby survived a fever. She insisted. I noticed how he'd pause outside the nursery door when the twins cried, his hand raised as if to knock, then lowering it again, respecting boundaries we'd never explicitly drawn. The way his footsteps would slow when passing the kitchen, as if checking I was all right without actually checking. And he must have noticed things about me, too, because the kitchen gradually filled with the foods I actually liked. Not just staples. Tea appeared my preferred blend, the one I'd mentioned offhand weeks ago. The rocking chair moved from the parlor to the nursery without discussion. We moved around each other like strangers sharing a boarding house. He rose before dawn to see patients. I managed the household, cooked meals, washed endless baby clothes. We spoke only of practical matters. It should have felt lonely. Instead, it felt safe, predictable. I'd had enough surprises to last a lifetime. One evening in early October, I found him in his study, staring at a daguerreotype of his late wife and son. I should have left him to his grief. Should have respected his privacy. But something in his posture, the way his shoulders curved inward, the way his hands held that photograph like it might crumble, made me pause. Tell me about them, I asked softly from the doorway. He looked startled, then grateful. Margaret, she was sunshine. Everything about her was bright and warm. And our son, Daniel, he had her eyes. He lived only 3 hours. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, too. He set the photograph down carefully. For what Garrett said to you? For assuming all men are decent when clearly we're not? You are, I said quietly, stepping into the room. Decent. I mean, you saw me standing there with nothing, and you offered everything. You offered everything, too, he replied. You agreed to marry a stranger, to live with his ghosts, to help him remember how to be human again. That takes more courage than I think you realize. I wondered when I'd started counting his footsteps. When had his silence become familiar? When had I begun to miss it when he was gone? These weren't questions. I was ready to answer, even to myself. We sat in comfortable silence then, two broken people beginning to recognize each other's scars. The clock on the mantel ticked through minutes that felt suspended, separate from the normal flow of time. When I finally stood to check on the babies, he said quietly, "Thank you for asking." I understood. Sometimes the cruelest part of loss isn't the absence itself, but everyone's insistence that you move past it. Forget it. Stop mentioning the person who's gone. I'd let him remember, and somehow that felt like the most intimate thing we'd shared. Grief recognizes grief, I thought, climbing the stairs to the nursery. We'd both lost things we couldn't name in polite company. Maybe that was enough foundation to build something on. Rose fell ill in late October. Nothing serious at first, just fussiness. A slight fever. But by evening, her breathing had turned rattled and her tiny body burned against my chest. I'd been terrified many times in my life. Terrified when I realized I was pregnant and alone. Terrified when labor started with no one to help. Terrified on the train with 2 newborns and dwindling money. But nothing compared to the fear of watching your child suffer while feeling utterly helpless. This was different. This was primal. Samuel heard me pacing the nursery floor at midnight and came without knocking. He'd thrown a robe over his nightshirt, his hair disheveled from sleep. Let me see her. I clutched Rose tighter, some primitive instinct making me reluctant to relinquish her even to a doctor. Even to him, Emma. He said my name gently, like a promise. Let me help. I handed her over. Watching his capable hands examine her with professional efficiency, he listened to her chest, felt her throat, checked her ears with practiced precision that should have been comforting, but only made my heart pound harder. Croup. He diagnosed frightening, but treatable. I'll prepare a steam treatment. She'll need to be held upright tonight, and she'll need constant monitoring. I'll do it. I said immediately. We'll do it. He corrected. You're exhausted. We'll take shifts. The truth was, I'd been holding myself together through sheer stubbornness, proving I didn't need help, proving I could handle everything alone, proving I deserved the second chance Samuel had given me. But exhaustion and fear make poor companions to pride. Around 3 a.m, with Rose finally breathing easier and James sleeping peacefully in his cradle, something inside me simply broke. I started crying. Not delicate tears, but great gulping sobs that I tried desperately to muffle against my sleeve. Samuel set down his medical journal and moved closer. Emma, I'm sorry. I gasped. I'm sorry. What if she'd gotten worse? What if I'd been alone? What if I'd still been back east in that boarding? House with no money for a doctor. What if? But you're not alone. He knelt beside my chair, not touching, but present. You're not in that boarding house. Rose is breathing well now. Those what ifs didn't happen, but they could have. They almost did. When I left Boston, I had barely enough money for train fare. I used my last coins on milk for the babies. If you hadn't... My voice broke again. If you hadn't offered me this arrangement, I don't know where we'd be. Emma, look at me. His voice was soft but firm. You survived. You got yourself and 2 infants across half a country with nothing but determination. You found solutions when there seemed to be none. You're not helpless. You're the strongest person I know. I don't feel strong. I feel terrified most of the time. That's what strength is, he said quietly. Being terrified and continuing anyway. He stood then, and I thought he'd leave. Instead, he retrieved a quilt from the back of the sofa and draped it around my shoulders with unexpected tenderness. Sleep, he said. I'll watch Rose until dawn. I promise I'll wake you if anything changes. Samuel, you don't have to thank me. You don't have to apologize for being human. You don't have to carry everything alone anymore. I wanted to argue, wanted to insist I was fine, that I didn't need help, that I wouldn't be a burden. Those words were right there, practiced and ready. The armor I'd worn for so long, it felt like skin. But the quilt was warm. Samuel's voice was gentle. And I was so tired of being strong alone. Instead, I pulled the quilt closer and whispered, "Thank you." For the first time since arriving in Copper Springs, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to be strong alone. Trouble arrived in the form of Mrs. Henrietta Blackwood, president of the Copper Springs Ladies Auxiliary and self-appointed guardian of community morality. She appeared at our door on a crisp November morning, accompanied by 2 other pillars of respectable society, I recognized the ambush for what it was. Immediately, I'd seen that particular expression of righteous condemnation before. In my mother's eyes when she told me to leave, in the boarding house matron's face when she turned me out. In the train, passengers who'd noticed no wedding ring. I was tired of that look. Tired of apologizing for surviving. "Dr. Brennan," Mrs. Blackwood announced, bypassing any greeting. "We've come on a matter of grave concern to the community." Samuel had been in his clinic seeing patients. I'd sent word through his nurse, and he now stood beside me in our doorway, his hand hovering protectively near my back without quite touching. "Mrs. Blackwood, ladies, how can I help you? It's come to our attention that your marriage occurred under somewhat irregular circumstances." Her gaze raked over me with undisguised disdain. "We've made inquiries. This woman arrived unwed with illegitimate children, was publicly rejected by Mr. Garrett. And you married her 3 days later. The talk, Dr. Brennan, has become quite scandalous." "The talk," Samuel said mildly, "is none of my concern. It should be, you're a physician. You treat our daughters, our wives. How can we trust a man who'd take in a woman of such questionable character?" Before Samuel could respond, I stepped forward. My hands were shaking, but my voice came out steady and cold. "You want to discuss character, Mrs. Blackwood? Let's discuss it. Yes, I arrived with my children. Yes, I was unwed. Their father made promises and broke them, leaving me with nothing. I could have abandoned them. I could have left them at an orphanage. I could have done what respectable society expected and hidden my shame behind closed doors while they suffered. That's hardly the point. That's exactly the point. I chose my children over comfort. I chose their lives over my reputation. And Dr. Brennan saw that choice and honored it. He didn't see shame. He saw a mother who'd sacrifice everything for her babies. If that makes me unworthy in your eyes, then perhaps your eyes need examining. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. But my voice came out steady and cold. And I realized something. I wasn't that desperate girl on the platform anymore. I'd changed. Somewhere between saying "I do" and washing Samuel's dishes and watching him play with my babies, I'd found something I thought I'd lost forever: dignity. And I'd be damned if I'd let Mrs. Blackwood take it from me. Mrs. Blackwood's face flushed crimson. "How dare you? How dare I?" My voice rose. "How dare you come to my home, yes. My home, and judge me for surviving, for choosing life, for accepting help when it was offered. Every woman in this town knows someone who's faced impossible choices. You just prefer to whisper about it rather than acknowledge it." Samuel's hand finally settled on my back, a gentle pressure of support. When he spoke, his voice carried a quiet authority that made Mrs. Blackwood step back. "My wife has spoken her truth, and I stand behind every word. Furthermore, I'll add this: Emma manages my household, assists with my practice, and has already earned the gratitude of several patients who've sought her help with their infants. She's knowledgeable, compassionate, and dedicated. If you choose to withdraw your patronage because I married a woman brave enough to survive her circumstances, that's your prerogative. But you'll find most folks in this territory value substance over appearance." "We'll see about that," Mrs. Blackwood snapped. "Come. Ladies, we've wasted enough time on this establishment." They swept away in a rustle of righteous skirts, leaving righteousness and disapproval in their wake. Samuel turned to me, and I expected to see regret or worry. Instead, I saw pride. That, he said softly, was magnificent. And despite my shaking hands and pounding heart, I smiled. But courage in daylight doesn't always last through darkness. That night, after the babies were finally asleep and Samuel had retreated to his study, I sat alone in the kitchen and let Mrs. Blackwood's words echo through my mind. Questionable character. Scandalous. How can we trust a man who'd taken a woman? I'd defended myself fiercely in the moment. But now, in the quiet, doubts crept in like cold drafts through window cracks. What right did I have to damage Samuel's reputation? He'd built his practice through years of dedicated service, earned trust through skill and compassion. And I'd brought scandal to his doorstep simply by existing in it. The truth was darker still. I was falling in love with him. Not the wild, foolish love that had destroyed me before, the kind that burned hot and fast and left nothing but ash. Something quieter, deeper, more terrifying. I loved the way he spoke to my children as if they were real people with real thoughts. I loved how he'd leave medical books marked at pages he thought I'd find interesting. I loved the gentle hands that had held my daughter through her illness, the steady voice that had called me strong when I felt weakest. And that love terrified me, because I knew what I was, what I'd done, what I brought with me. Damaged goods. Scandalous past, questionable character. How long before he realized he'd made a terrible mistake? How long before he looked at me the way Garrett had, with disgust and regret, better to leave now, on my terms? Before he could reject me. Better to protect him from the consequences of his own kindness. I pulled out the envelope Harrison Garrett had given me, the train fare he'd returned. I'd hidden it in the back of a drawer, never spending it, keeping it as insurance against the inevitable day when staying became impossible. Insurance against getting too comfortable, too settled, too hopeful. That day felt like it had arrived. I could leave tonight, take the twins, take the money, disappear before I damaged Samuel's life any further. He'd be better off. The town would forgive him. He'd been deceived, taken in by a desperate woman. Anyone could see that. His reputation would recover. I'd written the note and packed a small bag before I heard his footsteps on the stairs. Samuel appeared in the kitchen doorway, took in the scene, the bag, the note, my tear-stained face, and went very still. "Emma, I'm sorry," I whispered. "I can't let you sacrifice everything for me. Mrs. Blackwood is right. I'm ruining you. Your practice will suffer. People will stop trusting you. You deserve better than stop." He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, picked up my note, and without reading it, tossed it into the stove. The paper caught fire immediately, curling into ash. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Stopping you from making the biggest mistake of your life. Of both our lives. Samuel, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're scared. You think you're protecting me by leaving. You think your past defines your worth." He pulled a chair close to mine and sat down, his eyes intense. "But here's what you don't understand. I don't want to go back to the man I was before you arrived. I don't want my sterile clinic, my empty house, my half-life. You and Rose and James, you made me remember what it means to be alive. But your reputation will recover, or it won't. Emma, I lost my wife and son. I know what real loss feels like. Losing you and the babies because of gossip. He shook his head. That would be choosing cowardice over love. And I'm done being a coward. The word hung between us. Love. I can't promise I won't make mistakes, I said shakily. I can't promise I'll always be strong enough. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking you to stay, to build this life with me, to choose us over fear. The bag sat packed beside me. The envelope lay on the table. The door stood open. I could still run, still protect him from the scandal of me, still choose fear over faith. Or I could stay. I looked at the bag I'd packed, at the man sitting across from me, at the life I'd almost abandoned out of fear, and I made my choice. I stood up, walked to my bag, and began unpacking it. Each item returned to its place felt like a declaration. I'm staying. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing us. The nightgown folded back into the drawer. Rose's extra blanket returned to the shelf. The small bag of coins tucked back into my pocket. Samuel watched silently until I'd emptied the bag completely. Emma, let me speak. I interrupted gently. I need to say this out loud, to make it real. He nodded. I sat down again, this time closer, and took his hands in mine, the first time I'd initiated touch between us beyond practical necessity. His hands were warm, calloused from work, steady, healer's hands. Hands that had held my daughter through illness. Hands that had brewed tea for me countless times. Hands that had never once reached for me without permission. I trusted these hands. I trusted this man. When I came here, I was running from my past, from shame, from a future that looked impossible. I'd convinced myself I didn't deserve kindness, didn't deserve partnership, didn't deserve anything beyond survival. And then you offered me not just survival, but life. Not just shelter, but home. My throat tightened, but I pushed forward. You've seen me at my worst desperate, ashamed, terrified. You've seen my children at theirs crying, sick, needy. You've seen exactly who we are, including all the messy, complicated truth. And you chose us anyway. Always, he said softly. I'll always choose you, then I'm choosing you back. Not because I need rescue, though I did need help. And I'm grateful you offered it. But because I want this. I want to build a life with you. I want Rose and James to grow up calling you Papa. I want to assist you with patients and argue with you about treatments and sit with you in the evenings. And I took a shaky breath. And I want to love you, if you'll let me. His eyes filled with tears. If I'll let you, Emma. I've been half in love with you since you stood on that platform, holding your babies and lifted your chin. Despite everything, I've been wholly in love with you since you fought Mrs. Blackwood with more courage than most soldiers show. In battle. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to choose me freely. Not out of gratitude or obligation or fear of having nowhere else to go. I wanted you to choose this. Us. From strength rather than weakness. I understood then that this whole arrangement, the business-like marriage, the careful boundaries, the patient waiting had all been his way of giving me room to heal, room to find my own footing, room to discover that I could stand on my own before choosing to stand beside him. He'd offered shelter, but not cage, partnership, but not ownership, time, but not pressure. He'd given me the greatest gift, the chance to choose him freely. "I'm choosing you," I said firmly. From strength, from love, from certainty that this us is what I want. Samuel cupped my face in his hands, his touch gentle and reverent. "Then I'm the most fortunate man in Wyoming territory." "I'm still going to make mistakes," I warned. "I'm still going to have moments of fear. I'm still going to struggle sometimes with believing I deserve this. And I'm still going to grieve Margaret and Daniel sometimes. I'm still going to be awkward with emotions. I'm still going to work too many hours." He smiled. "We'll be imperfect together. That's what real life looks like." "Real life," I repeated. Not the fantasy I thought I was coming to. Not the rescue story I was afraid I needed. Just real life. With real love. And real partnership. "Is that enough?" he asked. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the pain, the shame, the desperate choices, the unexpected grace. I thought about the man who'd seen past my past to my present worth. I thought about the life we were building. Imperfect and honest and real. "It's everything," I said, and then I kissed him. Not because I was grateful, though I was. Not because I was desperate, because I wasn't anymore, but because I loved him, because I chose him, because this was my life, my decision, my future, and it was everything I'd never dared to want. 5 years later, I stand in the doorway of our home, expanded now to include a proper nursery wing, and watch Samuel teach Rosie and James how to bandage each other's pretend injuries. Rose, precise and bossy at 5 years old, corrects her brother's technique with the authority of a seasoned physician. James, eternally patient, lets her demonstrate the proper way for the 3rd time. Our daughter Margaret, named for Samuel's first wife, with my whole heart's blessing. Toddles between them, demanding her turn. At 2 years old, she believes she can do anything her older siblings can do, usually with hilarious results. The house lives now, truly lives. The preserved museum quality has been replaced with the comfortable chaos of children and work and love. Medical books share shelf space with children's readers. The parlor holds both Samuel's desk and my sewing basket. The kitchen smells of bread baking and the herbal tinctures I've learned to prepare. This is what healing looks like, not perfection, but life. I assist Samuel's practice now. Officially. The women of Copper Springs even. Eventually. Mrs. Blackwood discovered that having another woman present for certain medical matters made them more comfortable seeking care. I'm not a doctor, but I've learned enough to be useful. And Samuel says I have natural healing instincts. Mrs. Blackwood herself came around after I helped her daughter through a difficult birth. She never apologized. Exactly. But she stopped talking about scandal and started inviting me to ladies' auxiliary meetings. I accepted, graciously, because I'd learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about refusing to let past pain dictate future possibility. The town knows our story, or thinks it does. The whispers eventually faded, replaced by respect earned through years of steady service. Samuel's practice thrives. Our children are loved by half the territory. And I've found unexpected friendships among women who've lived long enough to know that everyone has a story. And most stories have complicated chapters. But the deeper truth, the one I think about on nights like this, is that rejection really was redirection. Harrison Garrett did me the greatest favor of my life by riding away in disgust. He cleared the path for someone who didn't see my babies as evidence of sin, but as proof of fierce love. Someone who didn't see my past as disqualifying, but as part of the journey that brought me to him. The right person doesn't see your baggage as burden, but as part of your story. Samuel comes up behind me now, wraps his arms around my waist, and rests his chin on my shoulder. Together we watch our children play. "What are you thinking about?" he asks. "About timing." I say, "About how we meet people when we're ready for them. Not necessarily when we want them. About how the wrong person saying no creates space for the right person to say yes." Philosophical today. Grateful, I correct. I'm grateful today. For what? Specifically, I lean back against him. For a man who saw worth instead of shame? For babies who needed love and got abundance? For a house that became a home? For a partnership built on honesty rather than pretense? For second chances and healing, and the courage to choose love even when fear whispered, "I didn't deserve it." "You deserve all of it," he says firmly. "You've always deserved all of it." Maybe I have. Maybe we all deserve love that sees us clearly and chooses us anyway. Maybe worthiness isn't something we earn through perfect behavior or spotless pasts. Maybe it's something we accept when someone offers it freely. Maybe that's what grace looks like, not the absence of judgment, but the presence of love despite knowing the whole truth. I turn in his arms and kiss him. While our children's laughter fills the house we've built together, imperfect, honest, and abundantly alive. This is the life I chose, and it chose me right back. Standing at that train platform 5 years ago, watching my intended groom ride away in disgust, I thought everything was ending. I didn't know it was just beginning. The right kind of beginning. The honest kind. The kind where you arrive exactly as you are, scars and babies and questionable past and all, and someone says, "Yes, you, exactly, you." That's not rescue. That's recognition. And it makes all the difference. 2-2.